Well, howdy, y'all. Hey, I'm going to do something I haven't done in a while. I'm just going to ramble on a thought and see if it panders out anywhere. I just got done listening to a Badger cast. And near the end there, they were bringing up something interesting. And it got me thinking, because someone asked in the comment section in the chat box, how does MGTOW affect women? And I said, MGTOW makes women civil. Right, and the premise was, MGTOW, if you actually look into it, don't look at the people. Don't look at the MGTOW content producers themselves. But examine what they say. And don't ad hominem attack. Don't psychoanalyze or whatever. Don't judge what they say by who they are. Don't judge the source. Yeah, look at the source of what they say. It's never a good argument. Women learn from MGTOW is that, and honestly, I've seen it too many times. What women really want from men is provision. Resources, money, whatever, even providing pleasure, providing comfort, providing stability, providing an emotional whatever, a sexual whatever. Just giving to women. I don't go into all that philosophical what's it over there. I mean, it's not a moral choice. What it is that you give stuff to women. That's what women like. What MGTOW makes women realize is that for men to provide the best, the most to them, men need to have civil societies, civilizations. Men make groups, as Turd Funny Monkey and a few other people were pointing out in the last year or so, with all the fracturing among various sub-MGTOW groups. Yes, men like to organize. Men like to provide books to read, provide buildings to live in, etc. And for us to do that better, or the most optimally, we need a civil society, one that builds, doesn't destroy. We're people that are, break stuff a lot. We're people that destroy stuff, steal stuff, harm things, kill things. Men who tear down should not be allowed, or should be discouraged. But unfortunately, what women often want are the type of men that do those things. The bad boys. Because the Badger cast was about that letter from that dude, nice guy, whatever. All that garbage. At its core, though, through all aspects of the male-female dynamic, what MGTOW, if a woman wishes to investigate it and actually think about it, what she really desires from men and from civilization, from society, is provision. And it's blatant on its face. Look at the welfare state. And so then and the bad boy, we can do the bad boy real quick. The bad boy is fearless. He destroys. He doesn't need your dumb TV. All he needs is his woman. All he needs is his vagina. Keep her safe in her mind. Right? And he's not gonna hang on to her. He's a bad boy. She's gotta follow him. He destroys even his own relationships with women. That's how destructive he is. That's how fearless. That's how independent he is. And I'm using qualitative language, so forgive me. There's no moral qualification to any of this. Now, where this all screwed up, and what women need to know, and what the Bible was saying, and this is why the Bible said it. Okay. Now, whereas the bad boys destroy, and women desire them, there's whom want and need. Women want the bad boy. They need the civil man, the civilized man, the gentleman, so to speak. There's the nice guy, the civilized man, the gentleman. Right? And then there's the bad boy, and he's like the criminal, the sort of rogue agent. He's so badass he doesn't even need a country. He's just off on his own. He can forage and survive, and he's so badass. All he really desires out of life is like air, water, food, and pussy, and he gets it all by himself. You can drop him. He can get it in Japan the same as he can get it in Africa. Asia to Africa. You can get it anywhere. That's how basic he is. He's very driven. He thinks of nothing higher than those base things, which is fine. Whatever. Women desire that because it's sort of a generalized, very survivable man. A guy that you can drop in any scenario, he'll survive. And like be able to get water, food, and get laid. That's a survivable dude. Right? But that's not civilized dude. Right? Civilized societies require grouping. And so, where this all screwed up, and this is what the Bible said, women should not be allowed in positions of power and authority, especially over men. Why is this? Because women desire provision. Where this leaps into feminism in America and equality and all this stuff, is that men said, fine, here. You want to provide for yourself? Go right ahead. But they always want more. I mean, they're always looking up. Right? Because they're evolved to look for the one who provides the most in their area. The one that is the best provider, the best at providing provision. Even in the civilized world. And so they get into the office and they all want the same better provider dudes. They don't want the guys below them. They just seek more. And the higher up in positions they get, the more and more inconsiderate they are of the poor men beneath them. Right? The more and more they will rationalize and justify clear, blatant violations of the law. For instance, there's an organization, right, where one employee brings in over $4.5 million, right, and another employee doesn't bring in any. Two dudes. Right? Now imagine that there's a woman who is, how should I say, providing sexual access, or granting sexual access in exchange for provision from the dude who doesn't bring in anything to the organization. Right? All three of these people are in the organization. Right? This is why you don't allow women in this upper management of organizations, right? From the Bible, old timey time wisdom. And so she engages in hypergamy. She starts getting provisioning from the guy that also provides the organization with $4.5 million. Now she doesn't care about her now beta chump douchebag ex-boyfriend. He's a loser, doesn't bring in anything. And she's getting everything she wants from the new guy. The guy brings in $4.5 million. Now the organization will be like, well, fine, fair enough, that's how it happens. You know what I mean? They would just be like, well, that's just what goes down. But if the organization's run by men, what'll happen is, well, yeah, that's just what happens, dude. Sorry, bro. But yeah, we'll learn to deal with it. Let's all move on. But when women run the organization, what'll happen is, because women like provision. It's a very simple concept. What they'll be is, well, hey, now we got a dude that brings in $4.5 million, and now the woman sort of monkey branched up. She engaged in hypergamy. She's now getting all her provision from the dude that's also providing us with $4.5 million. So the previous dude, who ain't providing the organization crap, and, who's no longer providing any woman with anything, right? Women at the top of the organization will be like, well, screw him, he's not a human anymore. Screw him. And then they will engage in rationalization and justification of their dehumanizing him, making him the villain, vilifying him, blaming and shaming him for everything. And eventually, what'll happen is they'll lead the organization to break the law. And what'll happen is other men or other organizations will come along, and they'll be like, well, hey, what you did put the whole organization at risk, right? What you did was illegal. I get why you did it, though. You're women. You're afraid because of your estrogen, your low testosterone. You're very bad at taking risks. You're afraid of something bad will happen. You're imagining and making stuff up. You're afraid of negative consequences. You're trying to avoid negative consequences. You're risk-averse, performance avoidance behavior by your nature. It's your hormones, it's your brain. It's the way you've evolved. Right? Because if you're interested in only providing and not giving, right? If you only want to take, well, that's how cowards live. Cowards only want to suck down air. I mean, they'll take whatever you give them because they're afraid to get anything themselves because they don't want to risk dying. Right? And so you evolved this way, right? Because you're the unit of reproduction, because you are the uterus. It's good for you to be afraid. It's good for you to be detached. It's good for you to be able to engage in abortion, to be able to engage in destroying other people's lives and not feel guilty about it, because that keeps the human race going. But on the negative side of that, you've evolved to also be cowards. Paranoid, fear-ridden, delusional cowards. Sure, not all this absurd deflection. Sure, no alt. But this is why women shouldn't be in organizations at heads of things, what the Bible said. And this goes into politics and women voting in turd flinging monkey, Barbarossa, my goodness, Stardust, all the hardcore weird stuff that feminists say is absurd. It goes into that because when women got the right to vote, and by nature you're the majority of the population, when women got the right to vote, what happened was they no longer were forced to select the men they need. Because the man they want, they could vote for. Big Daddy government, uber alpha male, provider. Like, I was listening to an Intelligence Squared debate just today. And some famous, I forget, obviously not famous, I forgot him, but some lawyer, judge, whatever, was pointing out that, and this is like famous for doing this, the government can provide infinitely. Not just in theory, but in American fact. But the nature of sort of the state, it has infinite power and infinite money. Because it's really just this, it's made up money anyway. Right? The citizens are essentially battling over bullshit. Right? Okay? And, well, when it hit me that's why you're supposed to protect the citizen against the state. Because the citizen is no chance against the state. It's like a chance against God in anything in a civil matter, even in a physical matter. Yeah, the government has nuclear bombs. Yeah, there's no way you, the individual dude or person, is going to be able to beat the government at any of its games. Which is why your rights need to be protected. And when women got into politics, the right to vote, the right to select their best provider, their best provision, or they chose the state. And they started having sex with the guys they want. Right? The guys that provide them the feelings they like. But not the guys they need. Which are the civilmen, the gentlemen. Right? The guys who make money. They call alpha fucks and beta bucks. This is weird, rough terminology. But I think you're getting where I'm going with this. And it's absurd that feminists argue about equality. Because men literally gave it to them every time. Do you want to provide for yourself? That sounds like a perfectly reasonable thing. I'm a man. I understand you would like to provide for yourself. You feel psychologically better about yourself as a human being when you can support yourself and you're independent of anyone else. As a man, I can understand where you're coming from. I thought we shared that as humans. Women got that in the workforce. They got that in voting and everything. And they still weren't happy. Why? Because they like being at a disadvantage. Why does the wage gap exist? Because women choose it to exist. And all the evidence will support this. And it's in their nature to want, ergo, you have to make less. You have to do less. You have to risk less. You have to do everything less. And this is not a moral qualification. It just goes to show that women are happier when their husbands make more than they are. When their husband earns more than the woman earns, women report being happier. That's true. And everyone knows it. You can look up on the internet. I'm not doing the research for you. Believe me or don't. I don't care. And so what happened with the voting is that they got the majority of the vote. Now they're up in the government. So what's happening is they're looking at all the men, like with the organization example earlier on the individual basis, with the women rushing to protect the female from any negative consequence that might happen from her beta chump douchebag who doesn't bring in any money to the organization. The sort of dehumanizing that happens to him, so they can rationalize and justify protecting her from stuff they literally imagine made up. Because now she's got, Big Daddy 4.5 million. Now she's got him. And the organization has him. So screw the little guy. This can be seen in society, in the voting, on a large scale. No one cares about homeless men. Screw him, he didn't provide shit. No one cares about the guys who kill themselves. Screw him, he's not a human. He's not a real man. He gave up on life or whatever. The guy's not providing or giving provisions to women in some way in exchange for sex. He's not a real man. If he's not, why bother about him? Who cares about him? If a guy's not providing physical or emotional pleasure, but a man's not entertaining or pleasing, giving a woman good feelings somehow, he's not on the right track. And in society, that's what's happening with the voting. And you can see feminism literally imagining and making up crimes to punish men for. Painting the vast swath of men. It's not just 80%. It's all men that they're claiming. Right? And when they do this, what they're trying to do is instill fear so that you rush to help them, that you rush to protect them from the thing that they literally imagine made up. At best, they literally imagined and made it up. At worst, they caused it. At worst, feminism is asking you to solve problems they're causing. Right? And the government's letting them get away with this. Because women have the right to vote. And the government just provides more and more and more just to women. Now, women, even in some places I hear, and it may be absurd, this may be something that pops up, they want to get rid of, they want to reduce the tax on tampons. That's absurd. In America, birth control pills are covered under federally mandated health care. Not, men still have to buy condoms. You can go, sure, you can go there and get free ones. Yeah, right, no one's going to go out of their way. The vast majority of human beings are not going to go out of their way to go to, like, a Planned Parenthood and pick up a bunch of free condoms. Right? And who wants to get condoms that have been open to the public? People that go to Planned Parenthood. Probably poking holes in them. That's why they're at Planned Parenthood. But, look, I was trying to be concise, and so I got off on a little long ramble here. I'm testing two things out. But if you hung in there, I think you get my point. What it is just women have gotten the right to vote. And so they are the government. They're the mass of the government. They are being represented. Their interests are being represented. And their interests are just being provided for and protected against. And there's a difference between want and need. The one want, they sexually desire, right? the men who are destructive, who are uncivil, huh? And they need the men who are very civil and very productive, can provide a lot of money. And before women had the right to vote, what it was that men up in the government could be like, hey bro, I know you're poor, right? I know even you don't even have the right to vote back in the day. Like back in the day, I didn't even have the right to vote. Most men, only rich men, right, had the right to vote. But at least the rich guy, the guy who was running the company, the guy who's running the organization, when he looked at the rich guy and the poor guy, he was like, hey man, that's just the way that shit goes. Yeah. When men were the only ones that had the right to vote, and only men were allowed to influence other men in politics, men were at least fair to the little guy. Right? They didn't actively destroy him. They maybe didn't help him. They maybe didn't go after the rich guy and hurt the rich guy in retribution, like punitive damages. Right? As a whole in a group. But at least they didn't actively hurt the little guy. When women were allowed to vote, when women were allowed to influence people in power, when women were allowed to get into positions of power, what happened was you started seeing them actively pick on the little guy, actively hurt and go after and harm the guy who's no longer human to them. There are men in jail who are in jail because they can't pay child support. So now they'll never be able to pay it, and the child doesn't have a father in his life, doesn't have the presence. That option is not even there. It's absurd. They're punishing the little guy for not being as good a provider to his child as the state. They're punishing him for that. And the women let the government get away with it. And they don't feel guilty about it because they now have a better provider. And so the guy who was the father is now a beta chump douchebag who's not even a human being. He's vilified and kicked out and destroyed and turned into the very thing that all the women claimed he was to begin with. It was self-fulfilling prophecy. And then ironically, what happens is these men are civilized men, they're gentlemen. They make society. Their power over women was financial. Right? Women didn't like that. But there was a chump moron douchebag. They said, fine, you want to provide for yourself, fine, go ahead. Women did. Women did, and for decades they refused to provide as well for themselves as men provide for themselves. Outright refused. It's their choices. Right? They choose to work less, they choose different jobs, right? They choose to earn less. But they still want the better provider. Or they need him. They desire him. What the body wants is the guy who's bad at providing. The body wants the guy who destroys things, breaks things. That's what they want. And so the guy that provides them the feelings they want gets to, how shall I say, run around and destroy society, while the guys that are good at providing them what they really want, right, what they need, not what they want, what they need, are getting sort of not just bred out of existence, which is bad for civilized society, bad for women eventually. Not only are they getting bred out, but they're getting financially destroyed. And then on top of all that, it's all being allowed to happen because women can now vote. And those in power pander to the majority of voters and screw the minority. And since women are now in the majority and you're in the minority, well, that's especially harmful because women have sort of evolved by their nature not be too attached to anyone who's not genetically related to them. Even then, they'll abort their own children, throw them in dumpsters, abandon them at police stations. Yeah, the government pandered to that insanity. That's how much women influence government. Yeah, women no longer even have that dumb excuse like that Christian chick used in my last video. I mean, yeah, you're not attached to a guy. You're not stuck with a guy that you had a bad night of sex with forever just because of a kid. You're not even attached to the kid anymore. You can just drop it off at a fire station. That's how we change the laws. Because women are so crazy sometimes that they'll throw their own children into the dumpsters. And we go, oh, that's sad. So we change laws. That's how much women influence government. It's absurd. They don't even have any good excuses left anymore. That's why men allowed women in the workforce to begin with. Because that's just the way men roll. Right? Whereas before, when only men were allowed to run the government, what happened was, men were like, look, woman, I'm going to let you engage in hypergamy and screw your way up the ladder, right? But I'm not going to go after this dude just because you feel bad. You should feel bad. Yeah. Well, once women get into power, what happens? Once women have influence in those in power, what happens is the people in power, if they're men, they're pandering to the women beneath them because the women actually have power. They vote, right? They're in the office. They're there. He's got to deal with them. Right. He's got to deal with them. They have power. Right. Even if he's a male in the position of power, he'll pander their interest and destroy a dude because that's just how men have evolved. To just want to please women. But, when women couldn't vote, men are like, why do I care? Yeah, sure, I might, whatever, insult him or whatever. I'm not going to actively destroy a woman. No, because that's destruction. It's destruction. I'm not going to destroy another human being because I'm a civilized gentleman. I'm not going to destroy another human being just because you want me to. But now that women are allowed to influence those in power and be in power, they see no problem in destroying. They actually kind of like it. Oh, look, I have the guy. The guy I'm screwing is beating up that other dude with impunity. I got the better provider of beatings with impunity. Yeah, the government's got a monopoly on violence and crime. Yeah, the government's got a monopoly on it. Violence and physical force. Yeah. They can rape and murder with impunity. Yeah. They can beat you up all the time. Yeah, it makes total sense. And so, to answer the question, and thanks for hanging in there, what MGTOW provides women, if they really look into it, is understanding why civilization exists and what women need to do to make sure its existence continues. If they choose not to do that, well, they can have a nice day. They should always remember to go their own way. Yours truly, M.